All righty, I have 11:30 Pacific Standard Time on my clock. So we'll go ahead and say hello and welcome to everybody joining us today for TLC Day 2. I hope that you've been engaged in some wonderful presentations thus far. If not, if this is your first presentation, welcome. We're excited to have you today. My name is Kingsley Jackson, and I'm an academic resolution specialist here at UAGC. I'll be the host of this session, Caring is Sharing, Supporting Emerging Writers and Researchers. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Your microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we do encourage you to post your questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. So if you would like to use it, click the live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you Jennifer Dunn, who is our online writing consultant at UAGC, and Karen Minty, who is our outreach librarian and liaison to the Forbes School of Business and Technology at UAGC. Presenters, you have the floor at this time.
Thank you, Kingsley. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. Our presentation today is twofold. First, we want to demonstrate some valuable resources in the Writing Center and Library to support emerging writers and researchers. However, we want to emphasize using an empathetic approach when providing resources to students and to point out some opportunities that faculty and academic staff have to connect with students while offering these helpful resources to help ease their anxiety and build their confidence in an academic environment.
So on this slide, we see Caring by Sharing. This is an overview of the strategies that we recommend when nurturing emerging writers and researchers. First and foremost, the basis of our culture of care, use an empathetic approach to supports. Now, when I'm working with a student struggling with using the library, I try to remind them that they do research all the time. And that's an easy way to start off on an empathetic foot and access that pre-knowledge in a way that honors their lived experience. Anytime they're Googling something, they're already doing the work to evaluate information online. Even when they write a Facebook post or compose an email, they're already working to present information for an intended purpose. Getting over that initial fear of failure and seeing, hey, I'm already doing this, can really help them realize their potential as emerging researchers and writers. And that's a great launching point for you to support them in learning how to develop their voice in a more scholarly forum.
And an empathetic approach is letting students know that it's okay if they're still learning to research and write. And sharing resources allows the opportunity to share personal experiences and challenges with writing and research that you have had, while also providing helpful resources, which shows the students that we understand their struggles. Reducing anxiety and building self-confidence has been shown to boost student success. So positive interactions with students, including demonstrating empathy and providing helpful resources, can ease students' anxiety by boosting their self-confidence.
Whenever possible, personalize communication and supports. When we say caring by sharing, what we really mean is that we need your help as faculty, as the people working directly with a student, to share with them that we, their library and writing center, we're here for them and they have our unwavering support. And really, our goal is to meet them with empathy as an extension of your own empathetic online classroom.
And sharing learning support resources presents a fantastic opportunity to establish a connection with individual students, as well as from a pedagogical standpoint, kind of establishing that social and teaching presence in the classroom. According to experts, connections in the community, at home, and at the post-secondary institutions sometimes make a difference for students between achieving their goals and giving up. So sharing customized support, such as sharing a video if a student states that they learned by seeing, for instance, that can show students that you care about their success in the class and that you're responsive to their individual needs. And students can gain confidence from knowing that support is available to them. UAGC tutoring services, for example, are available to students 24/7. And this is a real boon for non-traditional students at UAGC and is a demonstrated pain point at traditional colleges with limited support hours. And it's also important to stress that it's okay to ask for help. Self-advocacy is another factor linked to demonstrated student success.
Finally, share specific support recommendations. We recommend being specific about what's expected for students to know with writing and research. Help them have access to that knowledge. Writing and research skills can often fall under the umbrella of a hidden curriculum. This is a concept that Sambell and McDowell defined as what's implicit and embedded in educational experiences, in contrast with the formal statements about curricula. In other words, it's what's expected of students at this level to know for academic success, but it's not always taught. And that hidden curriculum can be especially vexing for students from generational poverty, or first-gen college students, or students who, for whatever reason, did not have access to understand this hidden curriculum in higher education.
And resources offered to students are most effective when they're specific to their needs. So instead of sending students to the library or writing center in general, we recommend providing specific resources on topics that would benefit the student. Next slide, please.
So now we have some quick polls just to check in with what you've been seeing with your students. We just want to see and hear from you, our audience, about what pain points around writing and research you've seen in your courses.
All right, so we're starting with writing. So what challenges do you most often see students struggle with related to writing? Integrating sources and academic integrity, developing ideas and critical thinking, writing organization, writing in an academic voice, clarity, grammar, and mechanics, writing anxiety, or others. There's a lot of options here. And if it's all, that's okay too. And if you have any others that are any other challenges that you see in your students' writing, you feel free to put those in the chat as well.
Looks like we've got 100%. So we'll go ahead and share the results. Oops.
All right. It looks pretty even, actually. It looks like writing anxiety, grammar, and integrating sources got the most votes, but it looks like kind of evenly spread that there's all of these issues are challenges that you see in your students' writing. So this is really helpful for us so that we know how to best serve students and what we wanted to pull you to see if there's any areas, any gaps that we can fill with additional resources. All right.
Okay, so next slide, please. We'll move on to a similar poll, but this time about research. And let's see. Did the other poll launch? There we go. Okay, so now we're asking, think about how your students approach research and what sorts of pain points have they had? Maybe they go to Google for research over other preferred methods for assignments, like the UAGC library. Maybe they don't understand the appropriate sources to use at the college level. Maybe it's just an overwhelming lack of confidence in their research skills. I just went to a great presentation from the Writing Center, Louie and Millie, about information overload. Do they just feel overwhelmed with the amount of information? It is overwhelming. Or do you see other problems around research that you've noticed? And definitely feel free to tell us in the chat. Always curious to hear what students are faced with. Okay, so we've got 100%, and it looks like, yeah, that knee-jerk reaction. I do it too, and I've spent time in the library all day, but oftentimes we just go straight to Google or ask Alexa, right? So thank you for humoring us with that poll. And now we can move on to where we address some of these issues that we have identified. So breaking down our caring by sharing recommendations. With research, we run into a lot of what we call library anxiety. And actually, my colleagues in the library are doing a whole presentation at noon today on library anxiety that really breaks it down. But it's something any of us who've spent time in academia can take for granted. Here are questions that I appreciate when I hear students say these, because it takes me out of the library, my comfort zone, and puts me in their shoes where they might not know what is an online library. Many students probably have a much different concept of what a library is and what it's used for. When was the last time they used anything other than a search engine or Alexa to find info online? Also, why can't I just use Google? What are the benefits? Why does the library seem so difficult at first? And you know what? I'm real with students. The library is nothing like Google. It is hard to do quality academic research. It just is. But we're here to help. And with a little knowledge and a lot of practice, it does get way easier. And it gets faster. So often from students, I hear, am I really supposed to do all this research? I don't have the time to do this. Yes, I know it feels overwhelming. It is overwhelming. But we're going to help students make the most of the time that they do have for research. That's our job as librarians, is to help them break it down, small manageable parts, give them the tools and tips that they need. Finally, questions like what makes a source scholarly? Or the big one, how do I know if what I find is okay? So often it just boils down to helping students feel confident in their skills and understanding where they fit into the scholarly conversation around a topic. They have a voice, they have something to say. We are helping them find it. Next slide, please. So whether you're teaching a course or designing a course, especially if it requires research, I recommend you ask yourself these questions. What kinds of resources do you want your students to find? Are there specific databases that you want them to use? What stumbling blocks could you imagine they might have along the way? This helps us to help you build that scaffolding so that students feel supported with research until they're strong enough to stand on their own. Also, encourage the use of library tools, which we'll show you in just a second, that can help save students time. And remind them they have unlimited librarian lifelines. And faculty have unlimited librarian lifelines too. We're here to help you. So help us get your students connected to the resources that they need. Next slide, please. So as I said, library liaisons, we're available to help. We can create HTML announcements to connect your students to great resources. Here are a few different tip sheets and infographics that we have to address some of the common questions we just covered from students. And I'll share these links in the chat as well. So for students new to UAGC or just in need of some library tutoring to help with their research, we have our library introduction tip sheet on the left. And this links to top tutorials to help them get started with their research. We also have the best practices for contacting a librarian. That helps them get the most out of a session with a library tutor. Next slide. Now, there are times students will be expected to search the greater World Wide Web and times that the library is more appropriate. So here are a few tip sheets on either side to help them navigate both of those respectively. And then in the middle is our potential pitfalls of searching Google, which, as we know, as we said in the poll, can help a lot of students. And this helps them understand why Google isn't always the best resource. Next slide, please. These tip sheets are great for introductory courses. Our How to Read a Scholarly Article, it provides a literal roadmap to reading a scholarly article, which instructs students on the different parts of most scholarly articles. This is a perfect example of that hidden curricula, something that we take for granted in academia, reading lots of scholarly discourse. But if you're new to college level research, it can feel like a foreign language. Similarly, our hierarchy of sources tip sheet breaks down relationships between different types of sources and explains why they're not all equally credible. Next slide, please. Here we have our tools, SIFT and Crapo. These are great resources to share with students if they're doing a lot of online research, helping them evaluate information. Helpful reminders for all of us probably before we retweet, follow it back to the source. And these are just a few of the many tip sheets we have, examples of a tool you could share in your course to give your students that little information literacy boost. So these I'll go through pretty quickly. I just want to point out a few tools that students I've worked with always seem very grateful to learn about. They're small, they might be overlooked, but for example, the magnifying glass tool is a quick way to view the abstract, which again, that's that research jargon. I explained to students the abstract is just a summary of what the article is about, and that can save them lots of time in the library. Next slide. The Cite tool, again, a tiny tool most students probably overlook. It's in every database in the library, and it's a quick way for them to grab that citation. I always make sure to let them know they need to double check the citations with the references guide from the UAGC Writing Center, because citations can be wrong, but they do save students time. And RefWorks is another great tool, especially for students at the graduate level for doing lots of research. They can organize their research, they can build reference lists, and this is free for all students and faculty. Next slide. Yes, sometimes students reach out because they can't track down a library resource. Maybe it's not directly linked in the course. So if you see that happen, let us know. Unless you're in a course, of course, where you want students to, as an exercise, trace their resources down to the library, but we're happy to provide direct links to required resources. It can save a lot of time, and it just provides a better user experience for students because they can click on that link and it goes directly to the library article. And lastly, please let your students know often that they have experienced and kind, empathetic librarians who really want to help them, whether by chat, phone, or email, and we will meet them wherever they are with their research. And now I'll hand things over to Jennifer to discuss writing supports.
All right, thank you, Karen. So these are some of the writing questions and statements that students have shared with us and with their instructors. Students who are developing their skills can experience a lot of anxiety with the writing process. And as educators and support staff, demonstrating empathy around these fears and uncertainties is critical for students to gain that confidence and to be more successful at their written assignments. Next slide, please. When sharing resources, you might share your personal experiences or challenges with writing to help put students at ease. Let them know that writing is a skill that can be learned and developed with practice, and it's important to convey that it's okay to still be learning how to write. Some students come into the academic environment thinking that they should already know how to do everything and how to write. And it's okay if they're still learning. When sharing resources, it's best to share specific materials rather than general. So if a student is struggling with a thesis statement, it's better to send them for example, the Writing Center's thesis statement resources rather than just sending them to the Writing Center in general. And this will help build a connection with the student, as well as to help the student feel more confident that they're getting that individualized help. Students can also feel more confident knowing that help is available to them via the Writing Center tutoring services, which are available 24/7. And most importantly, it's important for students to know that it's okay to ask for help. Asking for help should be expected and not stigmatized. That's very, very important. And I want to share a few Writing Center resources that can be particularly helpful for emerging writers. And I can share the links and resources to these in the chat, or you can email me after the presentation or find them through a quick search of the Writing Center. All right, so critical thinking resources. The Writing Center has a few resources to help students with developing their critical thinking skills. We have a new resource on Socratic questioning that students can use as a guide for writing class discussion posts beyond the basic responses. I'm sure you all had the good post response in your class discussion threads. And so students can use these questions to prompt them to think more critically about course topics explored in written assignments, including class discussions. And we also have a helpful resource on analysis versus summary that will help students to understand the difference between reiterating course information and analyzing the content presented in the course. And if students are having trouble getting started, we have a resource on brainstorming and generating ideas called Overcoming Writer's Block, which can give students a boost in kind of beginning to write about their topics. We also have resources on basic essay structure and outlining to support students in structuring and organizing their written work. We also have a writing refresher series, which provides helpful links and resources to support students who need extra help or to refresh their writing skills that they may have previously learned but forgotten as they return to school. We have a refresher series for all levels of writing, from basic to graduate and doctoral level. So you can provide the most individualized support for your students, regardless of their level. And I want to note too that you can share these resources in class discussions and announcements or in emails as well. Okay, next slide, please. So based on instructor and student feedback and on the poll today, it seems like we hear a lot about that a lot of students report that they have trouble incorporating research into their writing. So we have a web page and a video resource to guide students on how to effectively incorporate research into their writing. And we also have an academic integrity module called Steps to Avoiding Plagiarism, which includes both text, infographics, and interactive modalities. And the nice thing about this module is that students can send proof of completion of the plagiarism interactives to their instructor or advisor, which can be a real good teaching moment in instances of plagiarism. Okay, next slide, please. Another pain point that was identified in the poll is grammar. To help developing writers with grammar, we offered a free premium Grammarly app to all UAGC students. And Grammarly is not just a proofreading or editing tool, doesn't just do the work for them, it's also instructional. And it lets students know not just what they're doing wrong, but why it's wrong and how they can fix the errors. Students can also receive live tutoring 24/7 and get their papers or short written assignments reviewed within 24 hours by submitting to paper review. Developing writers may benefit from submitting their initial discussion posts to paper review as well. So just a reminder that you can use paper review that students can use paper review to submit their discussion posts as well. All right, choosing a writing support. As faculty or staff, it can be really tough to determine which writing support to provide for different writing issues. So I wanted to provide some brief recommendations. We also have a which academic support should you use tool in the writing and library link in your classrooms, which you can also use. I'll put that in the chat at the end. If a student needs help with grammar, sentence structure, clarity, tone, we recommend providing them with our Grammarly page so they can download the Grammarly app to use in Word, Chrome, the Chrome web browser, Outlook, or even on their phones. Paper review is best for students who have drafted some work and need more global feedback, such as organization or thesis statements, developing their ideas, integration of sources. Whereas live tutoring is best for students who are having trouble just getting started or who don't really know how to develop a prompt. And it's also a good choice for students who need to kind of talk through an assignment and who request one-on-one help. Tutoring is also the best choice for students who need help with APA formatting. And finally, the website resources, some of which I already shared with you today, are designed for all students at UAGC, but they're particularly helpful for students who are self-directed and who would, especially if they would not otherwise seek out help from a tutor. And you may need to help curate the most helpful specific resources for emerging writers who need additional help. But what's nice about website resources is that students can bookmark the ones they use the most, and they can refer back to them later throughout their whole academic career. And if you're ever unsure of which writing support to provide to a student, you could always email the Writing Center for advice or clarification at writing@staff.uagc.edu. Gonna put that in the chat right now. All right, next slide, our references. Next slide, please.
So that concludes our presentation, and we are always open to hear more ideas about how we can improve these resources, how we can better reach students where they're at with writing and research. So please don't hesitate if you have questions or ideas, thoughts about anything, to reach out to us. And we have time for any questions that you might have right now if you'd like.
We also are open to strategies. If you have any strategies that you use to connect with your students while providing learning support, we would love to hear those as well.
I'm catching up with the chat. Thank you. Thanks, Harla. I enjoyed your presentation this morning. We're dropping a lot. We're going to be dropping some resources in the chat, so feel free to stick around if you want to grab those. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to us. I'll put the library link in chat just so it's hyperlinked.
Oh, Harla, we also have HTML announcements that you can use in your courses as well. So I encourage you to look at those. Those are listed in CETL on the Writing Center CETL page. So if you need any help finding those, just ask away, and we'd be glad to help you and point you in the right direction.
Our goal is always to make it as easy, low effort on faculty as possible to share our resources. So if there are any ways that we can make it easier on faculty, we will. Thank you. We know you guys are so busy. Oh, right.
Oh, the links don't work in Whova. Okay. Well, that's good. Thank you, Kara, for letting us know that, so we don't share a million resources that no one can access, because that's important.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. And thank you, anyone watching after the fact. We appreciate all that you do for our UAGC students. Thanks.
Thank you so much for attending today.
Yes, and special thank you to our presenters. We appreciate this wealth of information. I know I personally believe that every student can learn these skills with these resources that you've shared and an empathetic approach. So I really appreciate you. Thank you to all the attendees today. We hope that you'll join in some later sessions, as there are a couple more to round out day 2 of TLC. If not, just putting a plug in to remind you that tomorrow is our final day of TLC. Our final keynote presentation will be at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Fireside chat with Clint Smith that I know you just don't want to miss. So thank you and enjoy the rest of your TLC.